church worship ceremony.
So the Bible reading is from Hosea. You're currently in chapter 6 of the book of Hosea. So have you figured out what Hosea is about yet? You know what the book of Hosea, if I were to summarize the book of Hosea, it is how God is in a relationship, a covenant relationship with his people. And his people, just like a bad marriage, have committed adultery in that covenant relationship. And yet God still loves his people and he looks for their repentance. And so he has instructed Hosea to marry a woman of ill repute. A woman God says will not be faithful to him, but yet Hosea loves his wife just as God loves his people. And so I was thinking about that, and tonight's topic is the red flags of dating. Now, this is the final. I promise I won't continue on beating the bush on dating. But I thought it would be good for us. Last week's lesson was supposed to have this week's lesson tagged onto it, but it ran way over time. And so I had to cut it off the end. And I was only going to have it a 2-part series. But in dating, how do you know that the person you're dating is going to be a good person, a lifelong compatible mate? The truth is, you really don't all the time know for sure that that person is a perfect person. If you think they're the perfect person, spoiler, they're not. But there are certain things that we should look for that will help us to identify things that maybe we don't want in our marriage. Like Hosea, for example. You know, I've got a good friend who works for me, Mosey Yoder. And Mosey has a son who's in his 20s, and his son has been a point of grief, really, for his father and mother for quite a period of time. He got in with a bad crowd at a very early age, and yes, they have that in the Amish church. Got in with a bad crowd at a very early age. Got into some things that were bad. They ended up actually moving their family from where they were to a different Amish community in order to try to, quote, save their children. Very much the same feelings that you and I might see as our children begin to grow and make decisions that we as adults see are very bad decisions and very poor decisions, but oftentimes our children don't actually want to listen to us. Now, I'm thankful that up to this point, my children have listened for the most part, respected what I have to say. Every once in a while, it's like talking to a stump. There's no response, and then they go out and do whatever they want to. But, you know, Mosey told his son, Johnny's a very critical person. He's very detail oriented. Mosey said, you know, I tried to talk to him about what kind of women to date. Well, what about so-and-so? Well, her forehead's too high. Her eyes are too close. And Mosey's like, he can't get past the physical elements of a person to see who they are inside. And Mosey, having been married more years than I have, we know and understand that outward appearances change, but who a person is inside does not change. Hosea reflects that. Who we are inside does not necessarily change. So what I want you to do is when you approach someone, we need to be real. Dating will only work if we are real. How many of you have seen a peacock spread his feathers? You know what that peacock does when he is spreading his feathers? He fans his tail, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And that's exactly what he wants all the ladies to think too. And we know, science has told us, that a peacock actually feels a certain amount of pride. You've heard the saying, proud as a peacock. When a peacock spreads his tail feathers, he actually takes in and puffs out his chest and struts around the barnyard trying to impress the lady peafowl. And so when you are dating, when you're looking for someone to date, be real with them. Be honest. Be open. It's better to be open than to find out after the fact that you don't necessarily like things that you thought you had in common after all. I have no way of knowing if this story is true or not, but when a young man was getting to know his wife, the family had a custom of making homemade ice cream every weekend. Not my family, by the way. My family did that as well when I was younger. But their favorite was strawberry ice cream. They loved strawberry ice cream. And this guy is dating this woman, and he's starry-eyed, and he's in love with her. And they serve him up this strawberry ice cream for the first time. This young man absolutely did not like strawberry ice cream. There's so many other flavors that he liked better than strawberry ice cream. Chocolate, vanilla, you name it. Strawberry, in his opinion, was the bottom of the barrel for ice cream. But what does he do? He's a peacock, right? He's strutting his feathers. He wants to impress the lady that he's in love with. And he raves about best strawberry ice cream he's ever had. Fast forward 23 years. Every Sunday she dishes up strawberry ice cream. Every Sunday. There's 52 Sundays in a year. You do the math. You figure it out. How many times has that poor guy had to eat a bowl of strawberry ice cream with a smile on his face? Finally, after 23 years, his wife put a bowl of strawberry ice cream in front of him. He goes, I hate to tell you this, I really don't like strawberry ice cream. Can we have a different flavor? She's like, but you love strawberry ice cream. And the truth had to come out. See, the thing is, eventually the truth will come out in your relationships. So when you're looking for a spouse, last week we talked about places in which you should look for a spouse. I'm not going to go over all of that stuff, but I do want you to know that if you find someone in those places, it's okay, no matter what gender you are, to be open and friendly with that person. There's a concept that if you want to have friends or make friends, you have to show others that you are a friendly person. And so when you are in places, you don't necessarily have to walk up and I guess it's called hitting on someone. You don't walk up and hit on someone, but just be genuine and be real with them. Initiate the conversation. Just go up and welcome them into the group, or just simply say hello. In Matthew chapter 7 and in verse 12, here's something that I want you to keep in mind. And this goes towards just simply being friendly. Whatsoever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Jesus said that is a fundamental godly principle, to treat others the way you would be treated yourself. Now, when you're actually getting to know someone, maybe before you're dating someone, look at their interest. Find out what you might have in common and maybe what you don't have in common. Okay? I think it's important for couples to share certain things in common with each other. This morning when I did this lesson, I kind of joked a little bit about, growing up, my family thought that John Wayne movies were the greatest movies in the world. Then I marry my wife and find out she doesn't like Westerns. So, I've been stuck with chick flicks and classics, which I like. Anne of Green Gables, I watched growing up. But, I never thought Pride and Prejudice would ever make my list. But you know what? I really enjoy that movie. So it has broadened my horizons. But I'm pretty certain that I could probably count on both hands the number of different John Wayne movies that I've been allowed to watch since I've been married. But, and I probably could watch more, but why would I want to make my wife miserable knowing that she prefers chick flicks or classics? So again, look at common interests. Look at things that, when Kate and I were dating on the internet, one of the questions on the page was, do you have any pet peeves? Why do you think they asked that? Because they wanted to know, they wanted to identify if you have something that really irritates you. It's better to get that out in the open before you actually meet someone. Because, and I didn't realize that I had pet peeves till I got married. I'm scratching I don't have pet peeves. Then I realized I actually do have pet peeves. There are things that some people do that just absolutely are like taking your fingernails on the chalkboard that just grate on my nerves. Kate doesn't have any of those, at least not any that I'm willing to admit yet. So Solomon in Proverbs chapter 27 and in verse 17, Solomon says, iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. You might wonder why I have put this in here, but the reason I've put this in here is as you develop a relationship as husband and wife, if your interests are similar in nature, then you are actually going to grow closer and closer and closer together. The concept is the two shall become one flesh. And so it's a lot simpler. It's a lot easier. I'm not saying it can't be done. There are couples who have very little interest in common that manage to make marriage work and work well. But I believe that it is simpler if iron sharpens iron and one person makes another person a better person. If we have things in common, at the very least, a common interest in the basic principles, our life will be better and we will come closer together. Again, I want to stress, being honest with someone is one of the most important things because you don't want to, let's see, this is not necessarily a couple who are dating that have been dishonest in this account, but you remember Jacob. Jacob in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, had a dishonest father-in-law. And quite frankly, he had two dishonest wives. He woke up on his wedding night thinking that he had married Rachel. And he woke up the next morning and discovered it was Leah. He had a dishonest father-in-law who tricked him into marrying the wrong girl. That caused problems in his relationship from that day forward. When he finally married the right girl, can you imagine what a mess that would be? Two sisters with jealousy issues. And it was obvious, it's obvious from the scriptures that he loved one more than he loved the other. Be open, be honest. Solomon says he who loves purity of heart and whose speech is gracious will have the king as his friend. The eyes of the Lord keep watch over knowledge, but he overthrows the words of the traitor. One who is genuine, who is real, is the successful person, both in life and in marriage. Again, if there is a connection with someone, extend or accept an invitation, and I've put with parents' approval, even though my wife and I were well into our 20s, her mother came with her the first time that she met me. So I think it's important to include your parents during this time of your life. Moving on into red flags. While we're in Proverbs chapter 22, I want to look at verse 24. And in Proverbs 22:24, make no friendship, Solomon says, with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. I want to stress something. If someone demonstrates a characteristic of irritability, back off. I don't care if it's a man or a woman. I don't care if you're a boy or a girl. If someone demonstrates a characteristic of irritability, anger, wrath, malice, in that relationship, and look for something that is more Christ-like. You know, Paul gives us that list in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And I'm going to go there. I want to read that list with you. And it's really a what love is and what love is not. And quite frankly, I believe that this is a list of things that are lovable, that make characteristics of love. And when a person demonstrates these characteristics, they are capable of love and being loved. But there's also in the same list, intertwined, the Apostle Paul writes certain characteristics that do not lead to love and are not lovable. Last week I had the chart on. I probably should have put the chart on this week as well. But I'm going to read these over. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Now I want you to think about this for a moment. The first one on the Apostle Paul's list is love does not envy. Envy can sometimes be the result of peer pressure. You ever heard the saying, keeping up with the Joneses? What envy is, in the Old Testament, we would call that covetousness. The Ten Commandments. It's one of the, thou shalt not covet. And Moses goes into detail as some illustrations of what we're not to covet. Your neighbor's house, your neighbor's wife, your neighbor's ox, etc. Envy is wanting something that belongs to someone else. Now that might be the result of peer pressure. It might just simply be the result of a greedy, self-serving nature. You see someone who is envious of someone else, who desires to have what someone else already has. It might be a good idea if you did not continue a relationship with that person. Paul says love does not boast. Well, you know, there are certain people in my life who all they can do is talk about their own personal accomplishments. You can't do anything to top them. They boast about their accomplishments. It's my personal observation that a person who boasts about themselves is usually deep down inside insecure with who they are. Most of the time, these folks simply need to grow up. But nevertheless, I've listed it in the red flag because Paul says that is a characteristic that is not lovable. A person who boasts. This one builds upon boasting. Paul takes it kind of this next level, though. Arrogance. Love is not arrogant. An arrogant person is difficult to love. Why? Because they're already in love with themselves. They think that they are hot stuff. Guys, gals, avoid that. My daughter has a tendency when she sees such young men who are arrogant, she just says they're a jerk. And she lays it on the wall. Nothing wrong with that. Because most people who are in love with themselves, the reason they're unlovable is because their focus, their entire world evolves around them. And they rarely consider how someone else feels. So Paul has listed this arrogance as something that is not love. I want you to imagine for a moment. Imagine, if you will, that you are a woman and you are in labor and your husband can't feel that pain. We don't. And not being able, Abigail, behave yourself. Not being able to actually genuinely feel what someone else is feeling does not mean that we cannot sympathize with that person. But an arrogant person will seldom sympathize with what someone else is feeling. And I'll tell you what, if they are sick, they make the worst patients. Love is not rude. Now, remember, we're talking about the peacock here. I should have actually used the peacock as a created creatures for this one. But remember, we're talking about the peacock. This young man or this young woman is wanting you to see them at their best. And so the person you are dating may never be rude to you because they want you to like them. But look at this behavior as it relates to others around them. Maybe they're family members or their group of friends. Being rude includes belittling, sarcastic remarks, and a general disregard for you or others around you or them. I grew up in a family of critics. My folks could criticize anybody. Criticism and rudeness often go hand in hand. But being critical of someone does not mean that you disrespect them. You can disagree with someone and still respect them for who they are. If someone demonstrates rudeness towards their inner circle, their family, their friends, just imagine when the starry eyes come off and you settle into married life. Just imagine that being turned in your direction, because it will be. Love does not insist on its own way. I've kind of changed it a little bit for the lesson, but when someone insists on their own way, when you're dating someone, they obviously are attracted to you and you are attracted to them. But if you're dating someone, one of the major warning signs may include that they neglect your boundaries. It may also include that they dismiss your belief in God, and they may actually try to manipulate you into agreeing with them. Look for these things, my friends. Look for these. If I were to, most of the time you will see more than one of these demonstrated in a person who is not lovable. You're not, but you may only see one. That is enough. One of these warning signs may be all that you actually see. The others may actually be hidden beneath the surface of an individual. So Paul has listed insisting on their own way as being an unlovable characteristic. Remember, the Apostle Paul uses the analogy of a yoke. When you are married, you become one individual. Let's go back to Matthew chapter 19 for just a moment. This is why this is important. The Gospel of Matthew chapter 19. Oftentimes we turn to this passage to look at a divorce and remarriage. But I don't want to look at divorce or remarriage here. What I want to look for are basic principles that Jesus brings to our attention. And the Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? Now they knew very well, even in Moses' law, divorce was not allowed except for one reason, impurity. But just like everyone else, throughout history, these guys are testing Jesus, and they're testing him because they want to push the limit. Okay? We find ourselves today as Christians pushing the limits. Well, my husband's abusive. Why is it always the husband who's abusive? Don't we get any rights? Sometimes men can be abused. Okay? Right, Mike? Okay, just double check. All right. But what does it say? Look at Jesus' answer. Look at it carefully. And here is why it's important to pay attention to these red flags. Marriage is a lifelong commitment for the Christian. This is not something that you just go and you live with somebody as long as it works out agreeably. Had a guy come to me, a fellow contractor, came to me here a while back looking to rent a house. He said, well, my wife is not contributing anything to our marriage anymore. And so she doesn't realize it yet, but I'm looking for a place to move to. And I thought to myself, where does it say anywhere that your wife has to contribute anything to your marriage? It doesn't, in order for you to stay married. Now, we might look at these red flags and we might say, well, that's a bad idea. If someone's not going to contribute to a marriage, you might not want to marry them in the first place. But once you are married to that person, you are yoked together as a husband and wife. So it's important to look at this. But look what Jesus says. Have you not read, verse 4, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning, he's referring back to Genesis chapter 3, have made them male and female, therefore a man, and said, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. Let not man separate. Paul uses the analogy of a yoke. A yoke binds two oxen together. That does not mean that they are individual cows any longer. No, they are a team of oxen. They are a team of oxen, and they learn to work together. Did you know something? Oftentimes, when one oxen dies, the other will mourn itself to death. In marriage, we no longer are two individuals. We are yoked together and we become a team. My grandparents, for all of their faults and failings, my grandmother died in January 2008, January 28th to be exact. My grandfather died less than 5 months later. Why? He had no purpose left to live for. He should have, by all accounts, my grandfather should have died 11 years before. The doctors told us 11 years ago he's got 3 months to live. Why did he live? He was a team with my grandmother. And he wanted to make sure that the woman who had lost her mental capacity had someone to care for her. Don't insist on your own way. It's a dangerous thing. When two oxen are yoked together and one insists on their own way, ultimately the one who is stronger will drag the weaker one around. Irritable. Love is not irritable. We could look at hundreds of Bible passages for this. And really, honestly, I probably should have put Bible passages up for each one of these. But irritability manifests itself in anger, wrath, and malice. Irritability is just the beginning indicator of someone who can experience all of these. And finally, we've talked about malice before. It is the intent to hurt. And it begins with irritability. The intent to inflict physical, mental, or emotional pain begins with irritability. Find someone who's irritable, run the other direction. Love does not rejoice in wrong. I've kind of changed this to enjoy wrong. Kind of tweaked the wording for this particular lesson. This simple concept can be oftentimes overlooked. This is someone who rejoices when something bad happens to someone else. This is someone who enjoys something that is not nice. And it's unacceptable for any Christian. And it should be unacceptable for anyone who is headed to marriage. Why do I think this list is important? I'll tell you why. I don't like to focus on the negatives. I do not like to focus on the negatives, but I think this list is important because we as Christians oftentimes focus on all of the good things about a person, and we don't look at the negatives. It's true. It's what we are to do as Christians. But we need to look at these warning signs, and I'll tell you why. The number of Christian marriages, and I say that not loosely, I'm talking about two members of the church who marry each other and have failed marriages is because someone forgot to look at what love is not. It's very important. I know of at least 3 marriages, young Christians who married Christians. I know of at least 3 that have failed in the last year because we didn't look at the warning signs. And I believe those warning signs are there. Sometimes we do very good at hiding them. One of the things I think that plagues Christianity the most is narcissistic behavior. It's kind of a new term, but it's existed for years. And I think narcissism makes itself manifest in this one right here, insisting on their own way. Sometimes we do that by manipulating not necessarily our spouse, but those around our spouses. And I think that probably at least 2 out of the 3 marriages that have failed that I know of in the last year have been right here because someone is unwilling to yield. Someone is unwilling to allow their marriage to be a team effort because they want it to be all about them. This may or may not have been a lesson that would inspire you to become a Christian. But maybe you've seen something on that list that you say, oh, I didn't realize it. I am not actually a lovable person. Only you have the ability to change that. I can't change it. No one else can change it for you. But see, Jesus has the power to change it. And only you have the ability to allow him to change your life. Identify the problem. Take it to the Lord. Ask him for strength. Ask him for change. When we opened this evening's service, we sang "'Tis So Sweet to Trust in Jesus." I love that song. Because what it says here, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus," just to take him at his word, just to rest upon his promise, just to know, thus saith the Lord. He has the ability to change you, but you have to do your part. You have to do your part. If you're here tonight and you're subject to the invitation, I would encourage you to let us know what we can do. As together we stand.